question. So Sensory Access is a Seattle-based, so US-based nonprofit. It was founded by my daughter and I. My daughter is now 17, but several years ago already, we were talking and noticed how difficult it was for individuals with sensory processing differences to attend events in their community, whether it was theater or a sporting event, really anything that a lot of times families were leaving early or not making it through something, and how difficult that was. And through my work that I do through a clinic that I have as a neuropsychologist, I started speaking to a lot of the families that have children that are autistic, have ADHD, etc. And they would tell me stories of how they can never travel, how they can't go to a concert with their children because it's so difficult not knowing what to expect sensory-wise. And so my daughter and I started thinking about, well, what do we really need to provide? Can we change the acoustic environment? Can we change the bright lights? Can we just let people know what to expect so they can help themselves kind of prepare for the environment? So we now have a bigger staff, and we're growing and have worked on events all over the globe. Expo has been a fantastic project, still in progress. We started working with Expo over a year ago now, and we've done everything from just providing some training on what to expect, how to support people that have sensory processing differences as they go through such a massive event like Expo. We have gone through every single pavilion, so there's 190 or so pavilions for the different countries at Expos, and we've gone through every single one with a team of individuals with different sensory processing difference. So someone that's autistic, someone that has acoustic difficulties, etc., and rated all of these buildings for sensory impact. So someone can look at a sensory rating card before they walk into a space and know, okay, when I walk into the second room, it's going to be really overwhelming acoustically or in terms of flashing lights, and maybe I avoid that room so I can still experience this particular pavilion with my family or with the community. Sensory rating cards are a really nice, quick way to get information about sensory impact of an environment. Like I said, we go through with a team of individuals. There's usually someone that's autistic on our team, someone that has various sensory processing differences, and we go through an environment and we rate them on different things. So for example, the acoustic impact, the visual impact in terms of strobing lights and bright lights. We look at if there's any smells. We look at if there's going to be any difficulties with proprioception, which is where your body is in space. So if there's uneven terrain, or for example, if you walk into a room not knowing that that room is actually an elevator and suddenly starts moving, there's quite a few of those experiences at Expo. So we really try to look at all the senses, temperature, etc., so that someone can prepare themselves. Most individuals that have sensory processing differences are aware of what those are and know how to accommodate themselves. So sometimes even not changing the environment, but just letting individuals know what to expect allows them to go into an environment with headphones on or take a different route to avoid something that might be uneven terrain or hot temperature. And so it's really just being able to provide people with information. So all of those different senses are rated from 0 to 5 so that someone can, look at this card and get quick information about what the impact's going to be like. We also include information like any kind of strobing effects for those with epilepsy, so they know this one room is going to be something where I need to avoid because it might cause a seizure. Very significantly. So for example, I have hyperacusis, so I have really good hearing. I can hear high pitches. I can hear certain sounds really, really well. But on the flip side, they tend to kind of overcrowd each other in my brain. So certain sounds, especially sounds when there's multiple sounds coming from different places in a room, make it so I can't hear anything, and it creates physical pain. So for someone like myself who has that kind of difficulty, it can be really overwhelming, can can cause pain for several hours. For some people, I find, for example, with a lot of autistic individuals, it can get really overwhelming and start having someone feel like they need to shut down because, you know, it can be too much noise. It can be the type of noise it is. It can be really bright lights. It can be a combination thereof. So I've seen individuals in a huge crowded environment shut down and sit down in the middle of a crowd. So you can imagine how dangerous that is if the crowd starts moving, right? So you can have all sorts of, you know, physical reactions. You can have mental reactions where you put yourself into an unsafe state. And so the goal is to really help everyone know what to expect, keep them regulated. And then if they do become dysregulated, to provide a safe space to kind of get some of that sensory regulation back. So that's where, for example, at Expo and many of the places that we work on, we try to create quiet rooms, right? So there's a place where you can get yourself out of kind of the, you know, larger impacting sensory environments and create a safe, quiet environment where you can control the sensory impact. Unfortunately, I still think there is. It's getting better and better. And I think, you know, the fact that something as global as Expo, you know, in Dubai, I think the fact that they're bringing, you know, all of this accessibility in for autistic individuals, for those with sensory differences, I think is going to make a really big difference. I do find that a lot of times when I work on projects, you know, mobility and visual impairments and hard of hearing impairments have been considered and sometimes accommodated for. And then when we come in and say, well, there's this whole other set of disabilities and we need to create inclusion for them as well. It's often a surprise. You know, often I walk into an environment and I'll say, okay, tell me about your accessibility. Oh, well, we're wheelchair accessible. And then they forget about everything else. And it's not that they're forgetting or they don't, you know, they just don't know. They just need to kind of be taught about all the different types of disabilities there are. And most often when we provide that education, then they're more than happy to start talking about, well, what else can we do? How can we create accessibility and inclusion? I think it's just not as well known about. And so part of our job is education and training and providing that awareness, and then also talking about how easy it is to create some of that accessibility. There's still quite a bit of work to do. Like I said, you know, sometimes just yesterday I toured a site locally and here in Seattle, and it was this, you know, kind of the typical like, oh, absolutely, we're super accessible. Here's our wheelchair ramp. And so then I started talking about, well, how will someone access your space, you know, with visual impairments? How will they get a sense of what it is you're providing? And, you know, I got a little bit of a blank stare. And then we started talking about autism and we started talking about all these different ways you can experience, you know, what they had to offer. And they were so excited to start thinking about those things, but they're nowhere near there. And even with this one particular place, it would take at least a year to get all of these things implemented. And I think most places are there. What I think is positive about the pandemic, not that there has been anything really positive, but I think a lot of people were really shocked to not have live theater and live concerts and access to art galleries and all of these experiences that we as humans have taken for granted for too long. And all of a sudden, the general public didn't have access to these things. And now suddenly things are finally becoming, you know, opening back up. You know, over the last 2 weeks, I've attended all these live concerts through Sensory Access. I've, you know, started auditing sites again, theaters going back on. We're working on all these sensory friendly performances for different theaters. And all I keep hearing is people in the general public saying, gosh, it was so hard to not have events. You know, it's so difficult to not have them. I'm so glad they're back. And now is the moment where we can say, well, guess what? People with disabilities don't have access and they haven't had access. Imagine what it's like to be then. And I see this light bulb go on for the first time ever. So I think that I'm hoping that things become more the norm, or at least the norm is to start including all of this as part of the idea of accessibility. Absolutely. I've heard a lot of discussion in the workspace because we do sometimes talk, you know, work with different corporations on how to add in that accessibility. And I think for a long time it was like, nope, everybody has to be in the office and this is the lighting we have and these are, you know, this is what we have, sorry. Now all of a sudden it's like, wait, our, employees are just as, productive, if not more so, at home. And maybe we can provide, some different lighting, some different things, because this is a really valuable, human, and neurodiversity is something positive to bring to, our company. It provides a different point of view that we didn't have before, a really important point of view. So I think that things are beginning to shift in all these different areas, and that's really exciting to see that. It's a relief to see that, and I think being ready to start implementing those things is going to be really helpful. Really good question. I think it's a combination. I think that I know for us as sensory access, and I would assume for direct access as well, we don't have the ability to reach out to every single, school and agency and theater, etc. That's just insurmountable. But with the right legislation and the ideas of each company saying, what can we do? How can we be more inclusive in our hiring practices, in our actors if we're putting on a stage show, in our schools where we're educating our children? If they at least can start thinking about that, and then companies like direct access and sensory access can come in and we can provide the education, as long as companies are open and have knowledge that they need the education and the opportunities. I think at least, when we kind of first started, really doing a lot of events 3 years ago or so, I came across that a lot. There was some bigger events that we would work on where I really felt like we were just, marking off a checkbox on their list of, oh, okay, I guess we have to provide inclusion, so we'll do this, this, and this. But then when we would explain, no, we need to do these things to actually be inclusive. And we need to hear from the community that we're trying to provide inclusivity for. We need to hear the autistic voices, and we need to hear from people that are deaf. They need to be part of the conversation, and here's the list of things we need to do. Then usually the story was, well, we don't have budget for that, but we needed to be inclusive. It's like, well, if a company needs to be able to hear what inclusivity is and what accessibility is, and then implement those things. And so I think starting the conversation early. So when you start planning for an event, adding accessibility in at that point. I think up until this point, it's always been an afterthought. And you create the event, you plan the event, you invite everyone, you create the, all of the different sensory parts, and then you go, oh wait, accessibility, let's make sure we have ramps. Like, what are the things we can add on? I think now more and more people are beginning to think about it at the outset of an event, and that makes a huge difference. I feel that event should have been shut down the minute people breached that first gate, because that's already an indicator that you don't have enough staff for safety. Is the staff trained in how to extract people in an emergency, extract people with disabilities? Is their safety set up? Can you get to everyone in a crowd? I've worked a lot of music festivals. I've been in those security pits and overseen, because we had autistic individuals that wanted to be in that crowd but wanted to be there safely, so I knew where they were and could pull them out. And it is really hard to look over that crowd and to be aware of everyone. I usually tend to put glow in the dark bracelets on the individuals I'm looking out for, so they're easy to spot, so we can pull them out. But there is a lot of training that is involved in an event like that. And I don't think a lot of times the staff at these events have everything that they need to do their job as well as they would like to. And some, training and support, I think, would make all the difference. We collaborated a lot. Direct Access is amazing. They have so much knowledge in this field, especially around mobility and hard of hearing and visual impairments, where Sensory Access tends to focus more on hidden disabilities like autism, sensory aspects of the environment, etc. And so we, worked together on some things like the quiet rooms. Direct Access created the quiet rooms, and then we would come in and make some suggestions, and we would together then train the staff. So there were a lot of things like like that we collaborated on. We would go through and rate the pavilions and make the sensory rating cards and some overall social narratives about all of Expo. And then we would work with Direct Access to create, for example, if a tour was coming in, what are some areas that would be really good for this group or for a group that might have difficulties in this area. And so there was a lot of great collaboration. And I really think that having, either groups of people or a company that has all of these different areas of expertise is really what companies need, because, it's really hard to find that with just one individual. Again, you need to make sure you're including those voices of the very communities that you're trying to help and support and include.